Millionaire Joseph Watson entered a diner to escape the rain. But when he sat across from Olivia Grace, he began a journey of love, truth, and a family that would heal a divided world. The city of New York was a gray blur that afternoon, wrapped in sheets of rain that poured like tears from the sky. Horns blared in the distance, tires hissed on slick streets, and umbrellas collided like shields in a stormy war. Inside a black limousine, Joseph Watson, one of the most powerful real estate moguls in Manhattan, sighed heavily. His designer suit was crisp, his Rolex gleamed, but his soul felt hollow. He had just walked out of yet another room full of men pretending to be gods, arguing over which million-dollar buildings should go where, as if cities were their chessboards and people were pawns. Joseph, once thrilled by the chase of success, now felt suffocated by its emptiness. "Where to next, Mr. Watson?" his driver asked. Joseph glanced out the window. Harlem, not his usual neighborhood. Something in the rain, the rawness of the streets, pulled at him. "Here's fine," he muttered. Without waiting for an umbrella, he stepped out into the rain. The cold drops soaked his hair and shoulders instantly, but he didn't care. He wanted realness, something, anything different. He turned a corner and spotted a small, old-fashioned diner, its neon sign flickering like it was tired too. The smell of coffee and grilled cheese hit him the moment he pushed open the door. Warmth hugged him, a stark contrast to the cold outside. Laughter buzzed in the background, jazz music played softly, and the clatter of plates filled the air. But Joseph barely noticed. His eyes locked on an empty booth by the window, the perfect place to think. He walked over, slid in, and let out a breath. But he wasn't alone. Across from him, a young woman stared at him, her brown eyes wide with surprise and shimmering with tears. In her hand was a crumpled letter, gripped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her face, soft, beautiful, lined with pain, made Joseph pause. "You're at my table," she said gently, voice cracking. She tried to wipe her tears with the sleeve of her sweater, pretending like she wasn't crying, pretending like her world wasn't quietly breaking. Joseph blinked. I'm sorry. I didn't realize." He moved to stand, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the tremble in her fingers. Maybe it was the loneliness in her eyes, an ache he recognized. "Are you okay?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment, really looked. This man had the polished air of someone who didn't belong here. Rolex, expensive cologne, the stiffness of a life spent in glass towers. But there was something else too. Sincerity. "I'm fine," she whispered. Or, "I will be." Joseph sat back down, slowly, as if his body knew he was exactly where he was meant to be. They sat in silence for a few moments, broken only by the soft tap of rain against the window. "I'm Joseph," he said finally, unsure why he felt the need to stay. "Olivia," she replied. Her voice was quiet, but carried strength. "Olivia Grace." A waitress came by, gave Olivia a warm smile, and looked at Joseph curiously. "You two together?" Joseph and Olivia both shook their heads. "Separate checks, then." They both nodded again, but something invisible had already started to tie them together. Joseph ordered coffee. Olivia didn't order anything. Her cup of tea had gone cold. He glanced at the letter in her hand. The paper was wrinkled, and he could just barely make out the words "school board" and "custody hearing." "Bad news?" he asked gently. She hesitated, then gave a broken laugh. "Just life. Life being life." He didn't press. He just listened. Really listened. Maybe for the first time in years. Olivia spoke quietly at first, then with growing trust. She talked about her sister, gone too soon, about her nephew Noah, just 7 years old, full of questions and dreams, and about how the system didn't believe she was enough to raise him. "They say I don't make enough money, that I don't have a husband, that I'm too young to give him what he needs," she said bitterly. Joseph's heart tugged. He had built skyscrapers, moved millions of dollars with a signature. Yet here was a woman fighting to raise a child, and the world was trying to take that from her. And still she sat there, strong, dignified, even while hurting. She wiped her eyes again, embarrassed. "I'm sorry, you didn't come here to listen to a stranger cry?" Joseph leaned forward, voice low. Maybe I did. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Something ancient. Something true. The rain outside kept falling, but inside something had shifted. The coldness in Joseph's soul cracked a little. A warmth, unfamiliar but welcome, started to spread in his chest. He offered a small smile. Can I buy you lunch? Olivia hesitated, then nodded. Sure. Why not? You're already at my table. They both laughed. Not the kind of laugh that echoes in boardrooms or cocktail parties. A real laugh. And just like that, what started as a mistake became the beginning of everything. The millionaire had sat at the wrong table, but life knew better. He was exactly where he needed to be. The clink of cutlery and hum of chatter faded into the background as hours passed unnoticed inside that little Harlem diner. For Joseph Watson, time usually moved in spreadsheets and deadlines. But now sitting across from Olivia Grace, a woman whose world was as different from his as night from day, time melted into something soft, something human. Their coffee had gone cold twice. The waitress had refilled their cups without asking. Outside, the rain had lessened to a drizzle, but neither of them moved. They didn't want to. What started as small talk, the kind meant to fill silence, slowly turned into something deeper. Joseph had asked about the letter. Olivia, though hesitant at first, found herself unraveling pieces of her life to this stranger in a suit who listened without judgment. I'm raising my nephew, she said, voice soft. Noah. He's 7. Loves space and jelly sandwiches. He believes he's going to be the first black astronaut to find life on Mars. Joseph smiled. He sounds amazing. He is, Olivia said with a proud smile, though her eyes dimmed quickly. But raising him hasn't been easy. After my sister passed, it was like the world turned its back on us. Joseph furrowed his brow. Why? Olivia sighed. Because of who she loved. My sister was white. The man she loved, Noah's father, was black. My family, the ones who raised me in Ohio, went quiet after she introduced him. Cold. When she died, they didn't even come to the funeral. Joseph blinked, stunned. That's cruel. Olivia nodded slowly. It's more common than you'd think. They didn't want that kind of child around. My sister begged them to understand. She was heartbroken when they wouldn't. I promised her I'd take care of Noah. And I have. I will. But the courts, the system, they keep looking at me like I'm a case, not a person. She looked down, fingers tracing the rim of her mug. They say I'm not stable enough, that I'm young, single, not making enough money. And behind all of it, I can feel it, that unspoken question. Why would you raise a black child? Joseph felt something tighten in his chest. This wasn't the world he knew. His world was polished, manicured lawns and gated communities. In his world, pain was hidden behind trust funds and stock portfolios. In Olivia's world, pain was raw, exposed, undeniable. I don't understand how people can be that blind, he said quietly. Olivia looked up at him, her expression unreadable. It's not blindness, it's choice. They choose not to see what makes them uncomfortable. That hit Joseph hard. He thought of the gala dinners he'd attended, full of men in tuxedos who barely blinked when someone made a racist joke, as long as it was whispered. He thought of investors who carefully picked the right kind of neighborhoods to build in. Code words for gentrification. He had never questioned it. Not really. But Olivia's story turned his lens upside down. I'm sorry you're going through that, he said sincerely. She gave a small, grateful nod. Thanks. I'm not saying I'm perfect. Lord knows I've cried in the school bathroom between classes. But Noah is my heart. I'd give up everything for him. There was a silence between them then, not awkward, but charged. Joseph found himself studying her, the way she blinked too fast when emotions rose, the way her strength lived right beside her vulnerability. She was nothing like the women he knew from charity balls and business brunches. She was real, and for reasons he couldn't explain, that mattered more than he thought it would. Joseph, too, shared bits of himself. His distant parents, who sent him to boarding school at age 8, the empire he built, always trying to prove his worth to a father who never showed up. The loneliness that clung to him, despite the mansions and money. You ever feel like you have everything, but somehow nothing at all? He asked. Olivia looked at him gently. Every day, just for the opposite reasons. Their laughter, soft, genuine, mingled in the air like music. And then came the quiet moment that hung between them like a held breath. The rain had stopped. Streetlights outside flickered on, painting golden puddles on the sidewalk. The diner started clearing out. Still, neither of them stood. Joseph looked down, then back at Olivia. His voice, usually so commanding, softened. I don't know why, but I don't want this to be the last time I see you. Olivia smiled just a little. Me neither. He took out his phone. Can I have your number? She hesitated just for a beat. Then she reached across the table and took his phone, typing her number in. Don't make me regret that, Mr. Suit. Joseph chuckled. I'll try not to. They finally stood to leave. As they walked out the door, something unseen followed them. A bond born not of romance yet, but of something even deeper. Understanding. Two worlds had collided, not with noise or violence, but with quiet words, shared pain, in the fragile beginning of trust. Neither of them knew what came next, but they both knew their story had only just begun. In the weeks that followed their first encounter, something unexpected began to bloom, softly, quietly, like wildflowers in concrete. Joseph and Olivia didn't jump into love. It wasn't reckless or loud. It grew slowly, like warm sunlight spreading across a cold floor. Their meetings were stolen moments, a walk in Riverside Park under golden leaves. Midnight coffee runs where they laughed until they cried. A shared umbrella under spring showers close enough to hear each other's breath. For Joseph, it was a kind of life he'd only seen in movies. For Olivia, it was a chance to feel chosen, not out of obligation, but simply because someone saw her worth. But they kept it secret, not because they were ashamed, but because the world wasn't kind to love like theirs. Joseph's world, filled with money, power, and pretense, wouldn't understand a woman like Olivia, a Harlem school teacher, a black woman raising a biracial child, a woman with fire in her voice and softness in her hands. And Olivia, though brave, wasn't naive. She knew Joseph's world had sharp edges that could cut through fragile dreams. She'd seen what judgment looked like, and she had too much to lose. Noah depended on her. Still, in the corners of their hidden world, they thrived. Joseph met Noah one afternoon at a community center Olivia volunteered at. The boy ran up to Olivia with crayons and a wild grin. When he saw Joseph, he paused, tilting his head. Are you Mommy's friend? Olivia choked on a laugh. He's a friend, baby. Joseph knelt down. I'm Joseph, and you must be the famous Noah the astronaut. Noah's face lit up. You heard of me? Of course, Joseph said, smiling. You're going to find aliens on Mars, right? Not aliens, Noah whispered. New friends. Joseph's heart swelled. That evening they played catch in the park. Joseph's suit jacket was tossed aside, his shoes muddy, his laughter loud. Olivia sat on the bench watching, tears in her eyes. She had never seen someone treat Noah so fully, not as a responsibility, but as a joy. Later in Olivia's tiny apartment that smelled of cinnamon and safety, Joseph sat at her kitchen table, eating her famous sweet potato pie. It was a humble meal, chicken, rice, vegetables, but Joseph felt like royalty. This, he said, mouth full, is better than any Michelin star meal. Olivia rolled her eyes. You say that because you've never had my cornbread. He leaned back, eyes soft. I say that because I've never felt this full in my life. It was in those moments that love took root, in laughter, in silence, in the way they made each other feel seen. But secrets don't stay secrets forever. One morning, Joseph's assistant, Megan, saw him leaving a community center in Harlem. She didn't confront him, but her raised brow said everything. Joseph could feel the ripple starting. A week later, a question slipped into conversation at a board meeting. Joseph, spending time in Harlem these days? Gentrification project? There was laughter, but with teeth. He lied, looking into community outreach. But the walls were closing in. At an elite charity gala, Joseph overheard whispers. Heard he's dating a school teacher. In Harlem? She black? The words weren't questions. They were daggers dressed in pearls. He started receiving calls. We've heard rumors. You should be careful with your public image. Are you serious about this woman? Joseph, your father would be livid. One investor warned, your name carries weight. Don't throw it away. Joseph said nothing, but his stomach churned. For the first time in his life, he was ashamed, not of Olivia, but of the world he belonged to. He told Olivia that night, sitting in her kitchen, shoulders heavy. They're watching, judging. They think I've lost my mind. She didn't speak at first. Then quietly, do you agree with them? His head shot up. Number God, no. Then don't let them steal what's good, she said, eyes fierce. I've lived with judgment my whole life. If you love me, Joseph, love me out loud, or not at all. The room went still. He took her hand across the table. I love you, Olivia Grace, and I don't want to hide anymore. But even as he spoke the words, a storm brewed outside, one far worse than the first rain that brought them together. Because love, no matter how true, would be tested by the ugly truths of a divided world. And Joseph Watson was about to find out just how far he'd go to protect the woman and the child who had become his heart. The first storm Joseph faced had come from the sky. This one came from power, pride, and prejudice. It started subtly, a cold email, a missed call, a canceled meeting. Then came the real blow, a formal letter from the board of Watson Properties, signed and sealed, demanding an emergency session. At that meeting, Joseph sat at the end of the long, polished mahogany table. Men and women he'd known for years avoided his eyes. Some wore pity, others disdain. Your public image is deteriorating, one of the senior board members said sharply. The media is watching. I haven't broken any laws, Joseph replied. No, another man said, but you've broken expectations. Our investors want a leader who upholds the brand. You, dating a woman from Harlem, a woman raising someone else's biracial child, do you realize how that looks? The word looks struck him like glass, shattering inside his chest. This is who I am now, Joseph said firmly. I've spent years pretending to be a version of myself for your approval. I won't anymore. There was a pause, then the ultimatum. Step down quietly or we'll vote you out. That night, the headlines blared across screens like a cruel symphony. Millionaire love story shocks high society. Joseph Watson falls for Harlem schoolteacher. From penthouse to playground, Joseph Watson spotted playing catch in low-income neighborhood. A love story in the wrong zip code. They didn't use racial slurs. They didn't have to. Their language was dressed in faux concern and veiled superiority. Olivia saw the headlines before Joseph did. She sat on her worn sofa, Noah playing with Legos nearby, while tears streamed silently down her cheeks. She called Joseph immediately. This has gone too far. They're tearing you apart because of me. He arrived within 20 minutes. I'm not ashamed of you, he said the moment he walked in. You should be ashamed of what loving me is doing to your life, Olivia whispered. You've worked your whole life for that company. Don't throw it away for someone like... Stop, Joseph said, his voice low, urgent. Don't ever say someone like you. You're the first person who's ever loved me for who I am, and not for what I own. I don't want to be the reason you fall. You're not. You're the reason I finally stood up. She looked at him, eyes flooded. Then what are you going to do? Joseph took a deep breath, reached into his jacket pocket and placed a letter on her table. His resignation letter. I'm leaving the company. Let them run their empire of appearances. I'm building something real, with you if you'll let me. Olivia's hands trembled. Are you sure? I've never been more sure. They embraced, a storm of emotions swirling around them. In that moment, love wasn't gentle. It was brave, fierce. But just when it seemed the worst had passed, a knock on Joseph's door delivered a twist he never saw coming. A thick white envelope. No return address. Inside, a letter written in shaky cursive. Dear Joseph, you don't know me, but I know who you are. My name is Rose Watkins. I was your father's secretary, and for a time, much more. He never acknowledged our child, your half-brother. His name is Elijah. He lives in Harlem. I am dying. He deserves to know he has family. Please find him before it's too late. Rose Joseph sat motionless, the letter trembling in his hands. He read it again, then again. The words wouldn't settle. A brother? In Harlem? His father? The same man who built an empire on clean lines and clean bloodlines, had kept a secret that could destroy everything the Watson name stood for. He looked up at Olivia, who sat across the room, still calming Noah down for bed. And suddenly everything snapped into place. Fate had brought him to Harlem, not just for love, but for truth. He whispered the name to himself, Elijah. It was no longer just a love story. It was a journey of family, of justice, of redemption. And the real search for connection, identity, and healing was just beginning. The envelope was thick, yellowed with age. Joseph held it like it might catch fire in his hands. The note inside, written by a dying woman named Rose, a nurse who had worked for Joseph's father for nearly 30 years, was more than just a confession. It was an earthquake, and everything Joseph thought he knew crumbled. Your father had a son no one ever talked about. The woman's name was Delilah Moore. She was kind, brave, black. I met her when she came to the hospital crying, clutching a photo of your father. She gave birth to a boy named Marcus. He was beautiful, proud, and he grew up never knowing the Watson name, only the pain of being ignored. He married a woman named Celeste. They had a child, Noah. Olivia Grace is the woman raising him now. You didn't just fall in love with a woman in Harlem. You fell into your own family. Joseph's hands trembled. The letter slid to the floor. The name Marcus hit him like a strike to the chest. He had heard Olivia speak it, once, while looking at Noah with misty eyes. My brother-in-law, Marcus, she had said. He was strong, but he died too young. Joseph stood up, stumbled back, and sat down again. His mind reeled. Marcus was his half-brother. That made Noah his nephew, and Olivia, the woman he had fallen in love with, was already part of the family he never knew he had. The blood in his veins began to feel different, warmer, heavier. It wasn't just love anymore. It was fate. It was truth. It was family. He cried for hours that night, not silent tears, but aching sobs that came from somewhere deep, a place where little Joseph had sat at the edge of his father's shadow, desperate to be seen. He cried for Marcus, a brother he would never meet. He cried for Delilah, who had raised her son alone. He cried for Noah, who had never known that the man who now played catch with him in the park was more than just a friend. He cried because love wasn't a coincidence. It was a legacy, and now it was his responsibility. By morning, Joseph knew what he had to do. He raced through the city. His car sped through Harlem's morning fog like a bullet seeking truth. When he reached Olivia's apartment, he didn't knock softly. He pounded, breathless, desperate. Olivia opened the door, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Joseph, what's wrong? He didn't speak, not at first. He pulled the letter from his coat pocket and handed it to her. She read it slowly, her lips moving silently as her eyes scanned the words. Halfway through, her hand flew to her mouth. No, Marcus, your brother? She whispered. Joseph nodded, his throat tight. I didn't know. They kept it from me. My father, he erased an entire part of his life. Of my life. But not anymore. Olivia backed into the apartment, one trembling step at a time, until she sat on the couch, the letter in her lap. Noah is... he's my nephew, Joseph said. By blood, by truth. He's family. And so are you. Olivia covered her face. Her whole body shook. It wasn't just shock. It was something deeper, something older. The weight of being unseen. The fear of always being second. The ache of always being other. And now, this. Joseph knelt before her, his voice cracking. You're not alone anymore, Olivia. Not in the way you've always feared. I know I loved you before I knew this. But now, he took her hands in his. Now I know this was never just about us. It was about healing what was broken before we were even born. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I know, but maybe it's what we were meant to find. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Joseph, You're not the same man who walked into that diner. Number, I'm not. I'm better because of you, because of Noah, because of the truth. They sat in silence for a long time, broken only by the soft sound of Noah's voice from the other room. Mommy, is Uncle Joe here? Olivia laughed through her tears. She called back, Yes, baby. He's home. And in that tiny apartment in Harlem, filled with secondhand furniture and first-time healing, a new family was born, not built by blood alone, but by courage, by truth, by the decision to love, despite the cost. Joseph had walked away from power, wealth, and a legacy of silence, and what he found was something louder, braver, and far more beautiful. A family he didn't know he needed, but one he would never let go. Joseph Watson didn't sleep the night he discovered the truth. He stayed on Olivia's couch, not out of exhaustion, but because he needed to be there, where it all started. The sound of the city drifted in through the window. Children laughed down the street. Music played softly from a neighbor's radio. And for the first time in decades, Joseph felt at peace. The next morning, dressed not in his tailored suit but in a simple shirt and jeans, he walked into the Watson Properties boardroom for the final time. Heads turned, phones paused, conversations froze. Joseph placed a single envelope in the center of the table. I'm resigning, he said calmly. A murmur swept across the room. Some looked stunned, others relieved. I've lived most of my life chasing wealth, Joseph continued. I thought success was measured by skyscrapers and stock options. But it's not. It's measured by the lives you touch, the family you choose, and the truth you stand by, even when it costs you everything. They tried to stop him, offered compromises, promised damage control. He walked away anyway. Within days, headlines changed. Watson steps down, donates $15 million to Harlem education. Former tycoon chooses family over fortune. Joseph didn't care about the buzz. He cared about the kids now reading books in new libraries. The teachers paid fair wages. The playgrounds rebuilt in neighborhoods like Olivia's. He didn't move back to his penthouse. Instead, he rented a modest apartment just 2 blocks from Olivia's. Not for appearances, but for belonging. He founded a nonprofit called the Grace Project, named after Olivia, focused on supporting multiracial families, single parents, and youth navigating identity in a divided world. And most importantly, he went to court with Olivia and legally became Noah's co-guardian. He stood before the judge, holding Noah's hand. I didn't know he was my nephew when I first met him, Joseph said, voice thick with emotion. But I loved him like family from the very beginning. Now I know he is my family, and I will protect him for the rest of my life. The judge granted the petition. Noah jumped into Joseph's arms and said something that would echo in Joseph's heart forever. I always knew you were mine. Months passed. Their small community began to feel like a village. Olivia's walls came down. She laughed more, cooked less out of necessity and more out of joy. Joseph learned to dance, poorly but with heart. He didn't miss boardrooms or gala events. He cherished bedtime stories with Noah, community potlucks, and lazy Sundays with Olivia. He learned that love isn't loud, it's steady, and family isn't perfect, it's present. One warm summer night, Joseph took Olivia up to the rooftop. The city sparkled below, alive and humming. Stars scattered across the sky like they'd been waiting for this very moment. Candles flickered along the ledge. A small table held 2 glasses of wine and a slice of peach cobbler, her favorite. Why are we up here? Olivia smiled suspicious. Joseph took her hands. I came to Harlem because of a storm, he said, voice quiet. I thought it was just an accident, but maybe it was something more. He got down on one knee, trembling, not from fear, but from hope. I found you. I found Noah. I found the brother I never knew I had. I found myself. This place, this community, this love, it changed me. He opened the small velvet box. Inside was a ring, not flashy but meaningful, a gold band carved with the initials MN for Marcus and Noah. I don't want to spend another day pretending to be someone I'm not. I don't want wealth. I want us. I want this family. Olivia Grace, will you marry me? Her hand flew to her mouth. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but her voice was steady when she said, Yes. I've never been more sure. They kissed beneath the stars, wrapped in a love born not of perfection, but of persistence. Months later, their wedding was held not in a cathedral, but in the heart of Harlem. Children ran between the chairs. Elders blessed the union. Choir singers lifted their voices. The scent of soul food and jasmine filled the air. Joseph stood at the altar, watching Olivia walk toward him, radiant and strong. And when they exchanged vows, they didn't just promise to love each other. They vowed to raise Noah with pride in every part of who he was, to build bridges where others burned them, to be the family that Marcus never got to have, but Noah now did. Their love wasn't just a story, it became a symbol. That race doesn't define worth, that wealth doesn't buy love, and that healing can begin with a single, accidental meeting. In the heart of Harlem, a millionaire sat at the wrong table and found the family he never knew he needed.